All right, so continuing on with this build, I did this about a week or so ago, and actually the car is all done at this point. I'm just trying to get caught up on doing all the videos for it. So bag B is what we're going to be working on in this video. And one of the things that I like to share with these videos are the tools that I use that people might not be aware of. So one of the tools that I find invaluable when building cars is this TRF turnbuckle adjuster wrench. It's got nice little marks on it so that you can tell how many turns you're doing. Also, this TRF 5mm turnbuckle wrench. So we've got this that goes over the end adjuster, and then of course this notches into here. This is aluminum, and as you can see after years of use, it's starting to get a little bit worn. So I don't know how good of a tool this actually is. It's not super duper expensive, but it's not cheap either, so I'm not sure if I would recommend getting this. It's definitely a far cry better than the crappy little wrenches that come with the kits though. So if you don't get this one and you don't have one that has a bigger handle to grab a hold of and stuff, I would encourage you to get something like this. This thing, on the other hand, it's really awesome. Unfortunately, it's been discontinued because Tamiya no longer has a TRF division, so I wouldn't be surprised to see more of their TRF stuff going away. There is a non-TRF variant of this, and I put that number over here. So the discontinued one, which is here, you can find it on eBay for around 13 bucks. On Amazon, of course, ridiculously priced, $45. Don't even spend that. The adjuster wrench, which is this guy here, is $28 at Tamiya USA, which is probably full list price. And when I go to Tamiya USA to look for this guy here, all it says is discontinued with no price. So this turnbuckle wrench is $18. Oh, I'm sorry. Okay, so I confused things. This is the Tamiya version of this guy, where this wrench is this thing here for $18. At any rate, lots of companies make these turnbuckle wrenches, but I would definitely recommend getting something other than the kit version. I've not seen any other company make one of these, although they might. I just haven't seen one. And for $28, I probably wouldn't spend $28 on it, but I absolutely would spend $13 on this discontinued one from eBay if it's still available. The way that I build up my turnbuckles to keep them even, because when I first started, I always had trouble getting the amount of threads on the left side of the adjuster and the amount of threads on the right side of the adjuster. They were not ever perfectly even. I always had more on one side than the other. That's bad for strength because if you don't have enough threads in here, then they become weak. It's also bad for adjustability because if you have one that's over threaded, then the other one will actually fall out of the adjuster end. So what I do is I screw them all the way in and then I back them out once they're on the car. And I don't really measure it until they get on the car, so I can use the adjuster wrench to make the measurement rather than trying to hold them. I find it much easier and more accurate. So I screw them all the way in and then put them on the car and then adjust back them out. All right, so building up the front and rear damper stays. I've bought the FRP front and rear damper stays, and I went back and forth on whether or not I should use the FRP damper stays because this vehicle I'm building, I'm intending to use it in the cold winter time. And part of me is afraid that the cold is going to make these FRP damper stays more brittle than they already are. Now that said, I have these on my daughter's TT-02B, and she did break one. Of course, she was doing pretty high speed with a 13.5 brushless motor, and she cartwheeled it, and that's why it broke. So we're going to give it a try, and we're going to see how it holds up with me driving it in the snow. I guess if it lands on ice, then it's going to be in for a bad time, but if it lands in snow, then maybe it should be fine. Also, I'm not planning on putting a super high-powered motor in this. This is more for fun, less for all-out speed or anything like that, so we're going to see how it runs. And sometime in the future, after I have a number of runs on this, once I get it dialed in the way I want it to, I'll report on the durability of these FRP damper stays in the cold weather. But as it stands now, I'm going to go ahead and use them. And this is what that looks like when you get them all built up. And once it's on the car, it looks like this. So there's a lot of little blue bits, black bits, and whatnot. One thing you want to make sure of when you're putting on your turnbuckles is that there's a notch right here on the adjuster, and you want to make sure that whichever direction you put them on, whether it's if you were sitting in the buggy, which of course you can't do, but if you were sitting in the buggy, put the notches all on the left side or all on the right side, because this notch helps you know which direction to turn the wrench in order to extend or contract the adjuster arm. And you always want them to be all the same direction, so that if you put the wrench on the top and move the arm of the wrench forward, it's either going to be contracting or expanding that turnbuckle, and all four of your turnbuckles are going to be doing that same. You want to be able to remember moving it forward expands or moving it forward contracts. Whichever way you choose to put this notch, if all four are the same, the wrench on the top of the turnbuckle, turn the wrench forward, expands or contracts, always the same, all four corners. Turn it backwards, always the same, all four corners. So this little notch right here actually has a purpose. So this is me measuring it up. So I use my vernier calipers and I put it inside of here. Now I know it doesn't look like, because of the shadow, that these are even, but I assure you these are even amount of threads on either side. And I measure it up, and as I get closer to the measurement that it needs to be, right, which in this case is 11.5, this is too close, so then I just turn the wrench with my little wrench over here until I keep measuring it until it comes up to the proper amount. All right, so here we are with 11.5 between the adjuster ends. Now in step 15, what they're going to do is there's this tiny little white foam cylinder, and they have you cut it in half, which, if they can make this tiny little cylinder in the factory, why can't they cut the thing in half? There are a lot of other small parts. And I hate the fact that they make you cut it in half, because I can never get the thing to cut nice and square. It's always at some kind of an angle. So I never use the thing. I only use an O-ring. So I dig around in my box and I find an extra O-ring damper seal or something like that, and I put that into the outdrive rather than this little white urethane bushing, is what it's called. MB27 is what it says in the manual on step 15, and I hate it. So it falls out. Even if you get it cut in half, it's going to be a little crooked. Just go with a rubber damper. That's my recommendation. And here's what they look like, the two little rubber dampers, and here's that little foam urethane piece right there. So skip this and go with these guys. This is what the whole front end looks like when it's all built up, right? So this MS kit doesn't have the thick, fat dog bones. It has these long metal ones here. So you know, it's a little bit more durable, a little less bulky. It looks a little bit more svelte, so that's kind of nice having these metal dog bones rather than the black plasticky ones, which is why we have to put the O-ring dampers in here, because there's a little bit more slack in here. They rattle back and forth a little bit, and if you don't have the O-ring damper. Now, I only put one O-ring damper in, and I put it in the outside cup. I don't put it on the inside cup. And that gives me enough play to allow it to move up and down, not bind up. 2 O-rings seems to be too much. Anyways, that's how I do my build. Now, on this MS kit, it comes with the rear uprights with the aluminum upgrades. That's part of the MS kit. And because we're going a metal screw into aluminum upright, you need to use Threadlock. Now, you should never use red Threadlock, which is permanent Threadlock. And this is the Tamiya anaerobic gel, which, while it is colored red, it is not a permanent Threadlock. And I wish they wouldn't make it red. I wish they would make it blue so it was industry standard, but Tamiya does what they want to do. So what I'll do is, you can see how I've got a lot here on the edge. So if you get this stuff, you can dip it in the gel, and it's got a very kind of plastic sticky consistency. And then I use and I just spin the screw along the edge of the cup here to get any excess off, so that there's only gel inside the valley of the screw threads, and then I go ahead and screw it in. So that's why you see that there's a lot of this gel on the inside of the plastic here, because that's what I've been doing, is scooping up a little bit and then running it around on the inside of this while I rotate that screw. I really like the anaerobic gel. It doesn't harden up the way a Threadlock liquid does. It doesn't drip all over the place the way a Threadlock liquid does. It stays a little tacky, and it does a really good job. I find this is actually my favorite thread gel. Anti-threadlock, so that's my recommendation on that. So here is the FRP rear damper stay installed. It basically installs exactly like the front one, and you see I'm using all the stainless steel screws to keep this thing from rusting. We've got the rear arms on here that I set up exactly the way I did the fronts, and then I measured it off the buggy, or on the buggy. Now, of course, the kit comes with CVA dampers, and they're very nice. And a lot of people look down their noses at CVA dampers, and I've tried a lot of aftermarket dampers on a number of different RC cars. And I got to tell you, the Tamiya CVA dampers that have the discs with the holes in it that you need to use the little E-clips on to hold on the shock shaft, those CVA dampers that use these oil seals here are outstanding. They're really fantastic. They almost never leak. When you put them together properly and take care of them, keep them clean, they're really, really wonderful. So honestly, on a basher, even on some entry-level racing stuff, you're probably fine with CVA dampers. Now, that said, I upgraded my daughter's TT-02B years and years ago, the shocks, which means her shocks, her CVA dampers, were already built in a box. So I went ahead and dug those out, and they're probably haven't been used for 4 years, maybe 5 years. And when I took them apart to check the oil and stuff, I noticed that the oil seals, the domes had concaved. Right, so these are the new domes from my MS kit that I'm building here, and these are the 4 or 5 year old domes from her CVA dampers on her TT-02B. Clearly, if your oil sealed have domed in like this, have caved, these are non-usable. They're probably hard, even though when I build up shocks, every O-ring and every oil seal I always coat in either Team Associated green slime or a product similar to that by another manufacturer, to keep the rubber pliable over a period of time. But clearly 5 years is a long time. So I went ahead and tossed these, and what I did was I pulled the aftermarket shocks off my daughter's car, because she hasn't really driven it much in the last 3 or 4 years, and I put the original CVAs back on her car with my new oil damper rings, right, her new oil seals. So these new ones went into her old shocks, and I took her aftermarket shocks and put them on this buggy. And these are the aftermarket shocks. They're G-Made XD shocks. On the front I have aeration style, which I really prefer aeration style over those diaphragm type shocks. Now the diaphragm in the Tamiya CVA shocks, I've never had them leak. Maybe it's because I take such care when I put them together and I use the green slime like I've said. I have tried a number of other aftermarket shocks by lots of different brands, well-known brands as well as not well-known brands, and they're all crap. Every one of them leak. So even these were not originally aeration. These were originally diaphragm, and they make these XD shocks in lots of different versions. So I had bought a full set of diaphragm shocks for her buggy, and I took them off her buggy and I put them on this guy, and when I went to check the oil on it, they were all wet and gross. I could not get the diaphragms in these front shocks to seal properly. So what I did was I bought the aeration caps, and I put them on the diaphragm shocks. It's a dumb way to go because it costs a lot more money, and these shocks are only $27 a set. So if you buy the aeration shocks to begin with, this is what they look like. I think they look really cool. They're a lot beefier. They don't seem to work any better than the Tamiya CVAs. So if I didn't already have them, I probably wouldn't recommend buying them. But if you're looking to get a beefier look, or just, you want to spend money on hop-ups and stuff, I do prefer aeration shocks. Now, the best shocks that I've ever used any brand on any vehicle are the TRF shocks, and I have a number of TRF shocks on different of my cars. They are smooth as butter. They are bulletproof. They're amazing, amazing, and they're also wicked expensive. So for 27 bucks, if you're looking for a slightly beefier shock than the CVAs or going for a slightly different look without breaking the bank, I definitely can recommend the XD aeration shock. So on the front of the buggy, you need the 75 millimeter jobbies. Now this is not going to be quite as long of a throw on the shock action as the CVAs, but this is the one that works the best out of the XD lineup. As far as the back ones go, these are the diaphragm versions. Okay, so let's put the diaphragm number down here, because these back diaphragms, they don't seem to be leaking. Whatever the difference is, I'm just not sure if it's poor fault tolerances when G-Made has these things built. They're exactly the same age, so there's no reason for the front diaphragms to be blown and the back ones to be fine. That doesn't make any sense. So I'm not sure. I would not get another set of diaphragm XD shocks. If I were buying brand new, I would get the 93 millimeter aeration style so that they match the front, but that's just me. So if you're looking for XD diaphragms, what you need are the 93 millimeters. This is the part number. If you find either one of the part numbers on the G-Made site, you can always get the 75 and the 93 millimeter in whichever version you prefer. They have piggybacks available. I would not go with those. They're extra complication that you absolutely don't need in this kind of a car. So, moving on to the step where we start building up the front steering. And I didn't put the step down because I wrote hop up instead. So where is the steering step? Give me 1 second here. Which direction am I going? It's probably after the shocks. Yeah, so step 27. So step 27 is putting the steering together. Now, I hate sloppy steering. In the TT-02B, the stock steering, it's not as bad as the CC-01, which is probably one of the worst Tamiya steering setups, maybe. Certainly not one of the best by any means. The TT-02 is passable for a basher car. However, I like to tighten it up a little bit using these aluminum parts. These are expensive, and I wouldn't put them on like my kids' cars, but on my cars I go ahead and put the extra expense in, and I spend what is this, $50, $60, $75 or so, $75, $80 once you get tax and maybe shipping or what have you. So 80 bucks for a couple of steering bits is pretty spendy. However, if you want to have the tightest steering you possibly can get, and this MS kit is going to be one of the best out of the box TT-02s probably that you can get, adding in these extra aluminum steering bits, you're going to see a difference. Now, whether you can actually transfer that into more fun, I don't know. But this is what I use. So these are the two hop-up kits that give me the aluminum steering, bridge, and arms. Now, I would highly recommend, if you want to improve the steering, rather than go what I did with these two separate bits, they now have available this. I didn't know that this was available, so I'm going to guess that it wasn't available back when I bought all these parts a few years ago. I always go with the high high torque servo set. The high torque servo set comes with all these black bits and these springs, but does not come with this servo horn. I use the black one, the plasticky job that comes with it. So this steering upgrade kit is really a very good value, right? Because we've said over here this is $50, $60, $70, $70, $70, almost $80 for just these two parts. Well, the whole kit comes with those two parts and the servo horn for only $77. So if you're going to go for it, improve the steering, absolutely go with this kit, as long as it's still available. This is a wonderful value. All right, so this is step 27 completed. So you can see we've got the Aeration XD dampers up in the front from G-Made. We've got our steering arms and our turnbuckles all set, right? Notice that I've got the little tabs and these bars all go in the same direction. We've got our steering upgrade kit here, and it looks kind of nice. So there was a modification slip that came in the MS kit that deviates this spacing from what the book calls for. So it needed to be at 20.5, and I was pretty pleased that I was able to get it exactly at 20.5. I wasn't even a tenth of a thousandth off. Now, this little junky wrench that came with the kit, absolutely hate it. It hurt my fingers even to try to use it. But this steering arm is not the same size as the turnbuckle, so I couldn't use my nice TRF wrench. So I had to use the smaller size here. And it kept slipping, it kept falling off of it. This adjuster nut kind of jobby here on the arm, it's got a rounded corners to it, which is just dumb to begin with. So I just went and got an adjustable wrench and used that to adjust this out. And since then, I have bought a multi-sided turnbuckle wrench that has the 5 and the 4 millimeter and even the 3 millimeter end, so I don't have to go out to my actual toolbox and dig up an adjustable wrench to get this thing adjusted out, because this is really heavy and bulky, and it was kind of a pain in the butt to get this adjusted using a real adjustable wrench, but at least it didn't keep slipping off the way this thing did. So that would be my recommendation, is find yourself a nice turnbuckle wrench. I think mine I got was a Team Losi Racing TLR wrench off of A-Main. That is quite nice, but it just came in the other day that I didn't get a chance to add that part to this because I didn't use it in the build. So there's my horrible mini wrench, and here is the correction slip to show you that step 27 should not be the 16.5 but rather the 20.5 up here. And then this is bag B done. So we've got the suspension fully built, we got the drivetrain fully built, the motor is in, ready to go with electronics for the next step. As I said, the buggy is already built, which means I've got all the pictures taken for bag C already completed. Once I get this uploaded in the next few days, hopefully maybe by this time next week, I'll be able to have the bag C video finished and uploaded. If you like the video, please leave a like. If you've got any questions, go ahead and leave your questions in the comments, and I'll do my best to answer them as soon as I see